Live interviews, and this month we've got Mike Churchyard. So thank you so much, Mike, for joining us this evening. And we'll just ask, I've got a few questions just to get us warmed up, as it were, and then hopefully we'll get some, we've got some questions. We've already got a good number of questions that have been asked from your friends, I think, over the last week or so, and then hopefully we'll get some more as well. And if you are watching this live, if you could just leave a comment in the comments below so I know people are there, that would be really nice. And if you want to just say how you know Mike, that would be quite nice as well. So thank you, Mike, for joining us. And maybe you could just start by just introducing yourself for those who don't know you, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks ever so much, John. Great honour to be invited to join the Run to the Hills process and all the podcasts that you're doing. It's really good work. So thank you, John. I'm Mike. I do class myself as an ultra runner. I started running in sort of 2003, 2004, but didn't really start the ultra scene until 2013 after an ankle operation. That's where I sort of generated my drive and interest in doing what I had learned as a mountain leader back in sort of 1990s, early 2000s, and building that into running as well. So I sort of built up from early stages of like 50 milers and thinking that was my lot, and then that's where it sort of projected me into where I am now. So I'm an ex-cop, so hopefully that doesn't mean a lot of you are now going to sign off, but I retired from the police in June, and that has affected quite a lot of my training. So I've had to be quite sort of realistic in what I can do and what I can't do to actually get the results that I've done. So ex-cop, and now I've retrained as a sports massage therapist living down in Sussex. That's a very quick snapshot.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Of me.
Yeah. Now, on your police work, you worked at the airport, is that right, at Heathrow? Because I've seen some photos of you at the airport.
Yeah, it was Gatwick Airport. So that was where I did my last 3.5 years. So just before retiring. So I was what's classed as special branch. So sort of specialising in counter-terrorism, that type of thing, towards the end of my career.
Right.
Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Different world.
Yeah. Well, obviously, this interview is all about running, so we'll get on to the running bit. And can you remember your first run, or a run which you thought, yeah, this is what I really want to be doing?
That was back in 2003. When a friend of mine at work decided that he wanted to do the Hastings half marathon, which is quite a popular and well-known half marathon down on the south coast. A lot of people use it as preparation for London Marathon because of the dates and what have you. And I think just one night he said, "Do you fancy coming for a run?" And we literally went out for a run on a night like tonight, rain, cold. The streets of a little place called Polegate in Sussex, which is not particularly a great place for running, but I just found that I got straight into it. You know, he'd been training for a few weeks. I was there to support him, but I actually felt like there was something about it that I really just enjoyed, just being out, exercising, fresh air with friends and supporting them. So I suppose that's where things have progressed from there, is that I just enjoyed supporting someone else. And then I went on to apply for the London Marathon in 2004 and got a place. So it went from there.
Excellent. Well, we've already got loads of comments, Mike. People coming in saying there's a comment saying that you're looking very smart, and we've got some. I think there's a few comments saying that it's like being at the cinema, and they're getting their pick and mix ready. So that's good. And if I have to say, I've got a number of questions for Mike, but if you've got a question or a comment maybe on things that Mike says, then feel free to put those in. Adam Firth is saying, evening, John and Mike. Looking forward to hearing some of Mike's wisdom with my spine debut just a few weeks away. So obviously we've got lots of questions about the spine, so we'll get on there. But before we do that, have you got maybe a 2 or 3 races that you that stand out on things that you've done before the spine?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the fact that I had an ankle injury back in 2012, and I hadn't really done any sort of ultras or let alone sort of off-road stuff. And a friend of mine, Darren Firth, who I did my mountain leadership course with, I saw a picture of him and the smile on his face. I thought, wow, that looks like something I want to do. So I messaged him. He said, it's just great combining your mountain leadership stuff with actually running in the mountains and the hills. So I signed up for the 2013 Lakeland 50 as a way of overcoming my ankle injury. I never looked back. You know, I think there were loads of comments. Mark mentioned the race director of the Lakeland 100. He mentioned that over 50% of the 100 runners don't even reach the halfway mark, so they don't even get to 50 miles. And I thought, absolutely no way then. That's nothing that I'm ever going to achieve. Cut a long story short, I decided to go for it. And there's a picture of me and my kids coming across the finish line. And that really did cement my love for running people, mountainous areas outside. So that's Lakeland has got a really special place in my heart. From the point of view, it was my momentum for recovering from injury, and also there were other things going in my personal life. So it's like a family that supported me through that time period. Then I move on to Highland Fling, that was a really special race because I suppose I hugged Lakeland 100, I hugged Centurion running for quite a while down in the southeast, so I sort of stuck to those. And then eventually there was a gap in my diary. That doesn't normally happen, but I thought, right, I'm going to do the Highland Fling, and I think you were quite instrumental in that, John, and what you've done for Highland Fling and West Highland Way. And I thought I've got to do a race up in Scotland. And that was the atmosphere, the people, the finish line with the pipes, just the terrain. It was just an amazing race, and I just felt, well, I think I was sick at the end, but the whole experience was just amazing. So that's my second one. And lastly, I know a lot of people sort of speak negatively of the UTMB, but if you look at all three races, when you look at the finish and the people that are supporting you as the runners out on the course, the UTMB, and I did the baby race, the OCC, finished early evening, and running through Chamonix was just off the scale. If you strip away the business side of some of those races that attract some of the negativity, the actual support that you're getting from thousands of people that are rammed in Chamonix as you're running through the village towards the finish was just, memories that I'll stay with me for a lifetime. And it just sort of cements that reason why I enjoy doing those particular races. Obviously Spine will come into that as well, but those three races, probably my top three.
I think, Mike, the first time I met you was at a Lakeland 100 race, wasn't it? Was that 2015?
That was 2015, and I think I'd spent about goodness knows how much looking at your videos with you and Dave Troman. They're still there and they're still attracting attention. A couple of route changes since you do those, John, so you might have to go back and revisit those. But it's great to meet you.
Yeah, no, it's a great event, and I've just been watching the Foxcast, the virtual race just started today, didn't it? Are you doing that this year? The virtual?
I am. Yeah. It's fun. So in fact, I ran just before doing this. I calm my nerves.
Okay. Yeah. So how many miles do you run this evening then?
I just did 7 this evening.
7. Okay. So
you kicked it off.
Are you doing the full one, 140 miles?
I'm doing the full one.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's kick off with these questions then, because I say there's got loads of great questions, and we'll start with one from Shaznay. I'm not sure if that's his nickname or his name, but he's a good friend of yours. He crewed you at the Spine, and he just wanted to know on the lines of what motivates you to do these types of events. But let's think about the Spine in particular. It's a 7-day event, 268 miles. So just tell us what your motivation was for taking part.
I think it's quite well documented on my my blog that I entered it 3 years before. I just entered the baby race, the Challenger, and I decided to pull out. I just didn't fancy the idea of winter boggy ground. A friend of mine had done it, and he said that there was nothing that it was going to mean that he was going to go back and do that. He didn't finish, and he said, I've got no interest in going back, just bogs. So I sort of wrote that off. I decided, you know what, that just sounds like hard work. And then in 2019, a friend of mine, Michael Burke, he was taking part. He wouldn't probably mind me mentioning, but he had a little bit of a hip injury, and I would say he's a much better athlete than me, more accomplished with speed work. And then, as the week progressed, the stories around Jasmine Paris and everything, someone that's not in my league at all, but it just electrified my senses. I was just absolutely sucked in, and I went and saw Michael Burke for a coffee after the race, saw his medal, and that was it. A medal. It wasn't just about the medal, it was the fact that he had achieved something that maybe even he at the time thought that he might not actually get to the finisher line, but he just plugged away. and achieved it. And I just, a bit like the Lakeland 100, I started thinking, I wonder, can Mike Churchyard actually pull this one off and enter this iconic race? And I just got the bug and went to the training weekend in the November. And that just cemented it even more for me. Being around like-minded people, giving some strategies and some talks from people that had done the race, Stephen Brown being one of them, the actual race directing team. It just thought, wow, this is on another level. So, that was my motivation for doing it.
Yeah.
I think I've got a bucket list, and I'm not afraid of a DNF. I know that sounds a little bit probably. And I do put it out there on social media what I'm doing. So I'm not afraid of actually, I don't call it failing, but not finishing. It's setting your goals maybe beyond what you think you can achieve and believing in yourself and actually coming up with strategies that give you the best possible chance of pulling them off. Why not?
Yeah, no, definitely.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think it does, and I think a race like the Spine as well, it does appeal to certain people, doesn't it? There's some people who it's a lot in the dark, and some people just don't fancy it. But I think those that do just embrace it and go for it. Right, the next question we've got is from Glenys, and she wants to know, does Mike do a lot of long distance running? But how do you train for this? Being on your feet or keeping going for that amount of time is just incredible. Do you follow a plan? So maybe just tell us a little bit about your training and preparation for this year's Spine.
I think I build it up based on other races. I'm not one for banging out miles, week in, week out, but I tend to have a solid sort of endurance platform, and then I train up to like a first race. So, for instance, 2019 was quite a big year for me, and I did several like 50-mile events. I did Lakeland 100. I did the OCC. And I think I tend to leapfrog from one to another, so it just creates that endurance methodology in me, and it also works from a psychological sort of thing, is that it pushes something like the Spine to the back of the pile. I'm not focusing or thinking of that. I'm sort of creating my endurance and my platform before starting a first event, and then leapfrog events. I mean, I love nothing more than actually turning up to race day, as I say, whether I finish or not. Some of that's in the lap of the gods when it comes to trail running, but the people that I meet, and it sort of creates a momentum leading up to the actual race that I'm doing. And then when it gets to the 6 to 8 week period before the actual race, like the Spine, that's when I start focusing on more specific things for that race. Like I did one recce. It's not massive, but then I suppose I've got other tools in my sort of toolbox that I rely on to actually achieve the endurance side of finishing a race like the Spine.
Yeah, and I suppose for someone like yourself living down south, it's not easy to get on the route, is it? For those people who live nearby, they can recce all the course over a period of 6 months or so because they haven't got to travel too far. Whereas it is a bit harder when you live further away, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the one bit of physical training I did do, I managed to fit a weekend in where I was doing my first sports massage course down in just outside of Twickenham, and I literally left from the course straight up to Chapel End of Thrift on the Frith, which is just near Edale. And I literally the next morning I just started out from Edale because I wanted to do the first section up to checkpoint 1, just to bank it to get a feeling for the terrain under my feet, and actually so that when it came to the start line I had some confidence of at least achieving that first section without really having to think too much about it. And I think that was a massive eye-opener. I mean, I'd never been on the Pennine Way. You could say that was a little bit foolish, but my word, it's completely different. Having been in the lakes, having been on the South Downs, having been in North Wales, the Pennine Way was just a completely different beast. And I suppose that sort of allowed me to change some of my thought processes about forward movement and bog. I was introduced to bog, basically. So,
excellent.
Yeah, massive help.
Yeah.
Had I not done that at all, I think that would have been a completely different beast. Just having appreciation of the terrain under my feet.
Right. Before I have the next question, I must apologise to Shaznay. She's a lady. I don't know why I thought it was a male, but I'm very sorry. So I'll apologise publicly there. Okay, next question we've got. Now, Mike has asked a number of questions, but he also asked about the Requiem, and also, we've answered that a bit. But for navigation, how much map and compass, how much GPS did you use?
I would say I had three systems. I had a Garmin 64S GPS, which is like rugged with buttons, bomb-proof. I had the Harvey's Pennine Way map, north and south, and I also had the A to Z mapping system, north and south. And I had the Harvey's with me, always in my front pouch where all the rest of my maps were. Never used it once. Never looked at that once.
Oh, right.
I think that was probably just a fail-safe, that like banker in case I needed some form of mapping with, I don't know, compass, whatever. Almost like belt and braces, as I would call it. The A to Zs were invaluable. Although the only thing I would do with those is I'd probably laminate them next time. So I just had the single sheets for where I was. It'd be a lot easier than having to take the maps out of the map book. Anyway, that's an aside. But I had those all marked up. I had the route highlighted. I had the arrows, so I knew which page to go onto. I had features that were on there, like water places for shops or anything like that. So they were all labelled up. But I must say that I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to navigation with my mountain leadership background. But on this particular race, GPS was probably 85, 90%. That said, some of it was no navigation at all. It was literally just following path or common sense of what you can see in front of you. But if there were any points where I needed to consult navigation, it was straight away GPS. And at worst, sometimes I used to have to get the A to Z out just to sort of confirm. Because I only had the 1 to 50 OS mapping on my GPS, and sometimes even with that, though, I still managed to get lost a couple of times there, to be fair.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Were there any major navigational problems that you felt you really wasted time, added distance?
Yeah, Malham Tarn is a classic. I just sort of, not Malham Tarn, but Malham Cove. And that was a typical, having never been there at all. You sort of go up the steps, and the footpath, sort of the very obvious footpath, goes left, because obviously the right is the limestone flags, and I just carried on following the left, and then by the time I realised that I was not en route, I got my GPS out, but because it didn't have a magnetic compass which shows you the actual direction you're going, you had to walk a certain distance before you could sort of retrack where you were. So I think I said at the time that my track on open tracking probably looked like a choreographed dance at Strictly Come Dancing, because I was going left, right, up. I kept on coming across walls. I just could not get my bearings as to where I was. So that probably lost me about 30 minutes.
Right.
So that was down to me, really.
Yeah.
Not being able to sort of preempt something in front of me as significant as that. And then the other ones were the odd dry wall, where muddy, boggy fields where you come to a place and there's no definition of the footpath because all the cows have just trodden it to rubbish, and you can't. I didn't zoom in on the GPS and didn't get my map out, so I sort of followed as far as I was concerned, what was the right route on the GPS. And then you get to the end of the field boundary, and then you realise the style is the other side of the dry wall. So yeah. A bit frustrating.
And it is marked. It is marked, isn't it? There are little markers all the way, but because so much is in the dark, you don't. I would imagine you don't see them very often, do you?
Well, I think it's. I mean, we're spoilt down on the South Downs. They've got really nice, posh, new finger posts and little posts and everything with the acorns on them. But you pass through so many council districts that some have got really poor marking. Others got this brand new stone with a white painted arrow on it, and then others just nothing. So it's for a national trail, I would say. It was, compared to what I'm used to, it was quite poor in places. You were having to navigate yourself.
Okay.
It wasn't obvious.
Yeah. Well, yeah, well done for not getting too lost. That was good. There's a great question here from Nicola Dunn, because I think one of the things that that the spine is about the mental strategy, and so she wants to know what your mental strategy that you use to keep going, particularly when things got tough.
I think, I think that's actually quite difficult. I mean, it's quite. I find it quite easy. I don't think at any point I ever thought, right, I actually have had enough and I'm going to give in. There were definitely dark moments. The hardships that you deal with along the route. You're digging deep, and it's about your own mental resilience. As how deep can you dig, and that feeling of, will I feel worse by finishing versus carrying on? And I suppose some of my strategies are, I've been in the police, so I've mentioned it millions of times about shift work with the resilience of nights. Sleep deprivation doesn't really affect me that much. Certain things that happen in your life give you some mental resilience, battle hardness through personal circumstances or situations that you've dealt with in the past. But also I'm quite vocal on social media, and there's definitely a couple of times where I've put out, I'm losing the will to live, I think one night where the navigation of my pole snapped or something like that. And I think you can either use that to your advantage. I mean, some people might say that can be a negative because it could put pressure on you. But I just think that the strategies you've got and the mental resilience to actually just keep going and realise the enormity of what you're achieving, and actually the fact that you're still moving forwards, seeing other people that were dropping out, that actually made me stronger rather than made me feel more concerned about the route and everything that I was doing. So it's a combination of a lot of things that never ever on that whole route did I ever think, right, that's it, I'm pulling out. But I mean, I don't know whether it's going to be a question that's going to be asked, but I never panicked. And I think some of that was down to the efficiencies that I'd built in with Checkpoint, knowing my kit, knowing where everything was. And even when it was going wrong, I didn't get flustered. I saw other people that were definitely flustering. They were stopping, they were sort of pulling stuff out their bag. Where is it? And you can just imagine that just plays on your mind over a period of time. And eventually it just drains you. Whereas I think I actually got stronger as the race progressed.
Yeah.
I hope that sort of
yeah, no, I think it does. And
Nicola's.
I think if it's whetted people's appetite as well, over the last few weeks, you've finally written your race report, haven't you? And it was in 4 epic parts. And I will put a link on the show notes on the YouTube channel once it's over. I'm sure if they search for it, they'll find it as well. But that's a very detailed report. And if people want to find out more about how your race went, then that's certainly the place to go. And I think one of the things, when I followed it during the race in January this year, I remember seeing 2 or 3 live, Facebook lives, and you're sort of just sharing how you felt. And I thought that was quite a good strategy in lots of ways, because the support you got, I was just scrolling through the comments from people, and it was lovely. People were with you and supporting you. And I can imagine when you're 2 o'clock in the morning and you're traipsing up a hill, just knowing that there's people watching your dot and they're following your progress, it can help. And there's a question here which Gareth has asked, which I think was on that line. And he said, how do you work through comments from people nowadays? It's impossible to avoid opinions. You must have had a lot of runners saying, you got this, or you'll smash it. Does that ramp up the pressure to perform? And on the flip side, when people say how hard it is, does that make you feel that it could be too hard? The simple version of this question is, would you rather get on quietly and do the challenge, or do you embrace the comments and these fuel you mentally? So I was quite interested for your answer on that one, because you are someone who is on social media and you like to share your story. So does that add pressure or not?
No, absolutely not. I love embracing it from the point of view. I like the idea that some people haven't got the opportunity or aren't fortunate enough to be able to physically or financially do some of the things that I do. So for me, it's about sharing the sense of the race, the environment, the weather, the rawness of some of my emotions, and it's bringing it into their front room. So I actually thrive of helping people sort of almost taking them to the outdoors, even when they're sat in front of the TV watching Strictly with the fire going or something like that. But I mean, you could argue it both ways. When someone says, "Oh, you're going to smash it," and I'm on day 2, I suppose I do actually just dismiss those. They're nice comments, but there's so much to the. We're talking spine race here. There's so much that can happen. You've got to allow the race to unfold as it's going. So, someone that says you're smashing it on day 2, it's nice to hear, and it does give you a little bit of a boost. But for that race in particular, I just got a sense that people believed in me. And even though there were a couple of negative comments like "get off Facebook," for me, that sort of fueled me. I probably get fueled by both ways. I get fueled by the negative comments and thinking, do you know what? I'm still doing it. I might have got lost a few times. I might have fallen over 500 times, but I'm still moving.
Yeah.
So that sort of fuels me in that way. But also it fuels me when people are saying, "Mike, you're doing great." Like, even my low points, there's Oliver that kept on sending me I called him the midnight caller. I got the sort of nighttime weather report and whatever, and it's just brilliant to sort of just have that, almost that nightcap of someone saying good night to you going into the night, and you just feel like you've got that final, "Keep going, buddy, and I'll see you in the morning." So I don't think I ever felt low on anything. And yeah, I mean, I know that I put a lot of stuff out there on Facebook, so, but I don't shy away from the fact that I've had a few DNFs. I don't feel stressed about DNFs. I know my strategies. I know my capabilities of what I can train. If I don't finish, I don't finish. But along the way, I'm hoping that I'm allowing people to get a sense of what's out there and these races, whether they can or can't do them themselves. So, sorry, always a long-winded answer when it comes to me, I'm afraid.
No,
yeah, I love it.
Good.
I just enjoy that sort of motivational stuff. I enjoy seeing other people. People keep saying that I inspire them. That's a lovely comment, and that's a little bit overwhelming for me to take. But I can see where they're coming from, because some of my friends aren't capable of running 5 miles, let alone going out into the wilds of the Pennine Way. They haven't got the skills to do it. So for them to get a flavour of it, I think, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
and to be honest, it's the same with when I look at people like yourself, John, or Mark Laithwaite. It's just other people that I'm inspired by that keeps me going along doing the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, I think one of the great things again about ultra running is that it's there's lots of different ways of doing it, and there'll be some people who hate what you do and hate what I do. I like to share my story as well, and and that for them would add so much pressure on, and they would much rather just get on with the race, almost not tell anyone they're doing the spine, and just do it. And that's great, isn't it? And then there's people like you and me who like to share our story as we go along, and there's room for both of us. And I think sometimes maybe someone who would rather keep it quiet, they look at you and think, "Oh, I could never do that." But that's not right for them, is it? So it's there's room for us all. And what we want to do.
I think just picking up on you very eloquently put it in your promotion of this one tonight from your last Run to the Hills, about that I'm never going to win anything, and that's and we can't get away from the fact that I am 2/3 of the way down the pack, back marker, but I just go about my business, and I suppose from that point of view, other people who might question whether they're going to enter something like this, and I suppose that goes back to what I said with Michael Burke, is that he had an injury. Had he not had an injury and he smashed the race in like 4.5 days, I might not have done the race. I don't know, but I was inspired by what he did. I knew he had an injury, and I thought, you know what, if he can do that with that, then there's a chance that I could actually do it myself. So I do get where I'm coming from, is that there's a lot of people out there that maybe wonder whether they should be doing it or not. But I say, go for it. Come up with some efficient strategies and give it a go.
Yeah.
Regret what you do, not what you don't. That's my motto.
Excellent. Another question which I think a lot of people want to know about the spine, and this is from Pascal, and he said, he asked, what was your sleep strategy? Did you sleep on the trail, or sorry? or just
she's a she as well.
Oh, she. Oh, sorry. Yeah, right. Okay. She asked. Did he sleep on the trail to about you, or just at checkpoints? Did you try and respect your body clock, i.e., no sleeping in the daylight? And what did you eat? But let's think about the sleep one. Did you have a strategy, and how did it work out?
Yeah, I did. I think actually, for me, sleep and checkpoint strategies are the two key things for the spine race for me. The forward movement actually was just the other two are things that you control. And the sleep strategy for me was because I didn't know the course, I wanted to make sure that I could bank some sleep. So I opted, and this could be different for people racing in January, so I do appreciate that. But for me, it was every checkpoint I got to, I banked my sleep, and I wasn't worried about whether it's day or night. And I'm fortunate that I think, again, with the shift work side of things that I've done, I'm used to working at night, daytime. I'm used to sleeping in cars, daytime or nighttime. So that didn't faze me at all. It was having a strategy that I knew that I'd get a certain amount of sleep at each of these points along the way, because by not knowing the course, if you're saying, right, I think there might be something coming up, and then that ends up not being a place to bivvy, or the weather's not right, then you're sort of on the back foot with sleep strategy. And then that again can start playing with your mindset of thinking, oh my goodness me, I need some sleep, but there's nowhere to sleep. So my sleep strategy was key, and I decided that I was going to sleep at every checkpoint. It did towards the end. I think there was I slept walk coming out of off Hadrian's Wall. And there's this it's just like this oasis of nothing. It almost looks like a scene out of. I based my blog on Lord of the Rings, although the trilogy ended up being a 4-part thing. And there's this oasis of just nothing, like the Somme. And I think by the time I got to the end of that, and I got to the wall, and I climbed over this stile, and I just sort of went left, and I saw this sheep trod, and I was off. And then 30 minutes later, I woke up in someone's garden. So I think that was when I then started going wrong a little bit, and I realised, I need some sleep. And Bellingham, which was the next checkpoint, was quite a way away. So a thing that I presume, I haven't watched all of Stephen's, but some of my race strategy was based on what Stephen told, and this thing called like a ninja bivvy, where you realise that you're that zombie, you're sort of nodding dog, you're falling asleep, and going through the forest was quite difficult with navigation because you've got the fire breaks plus the paths, trying to differentiate the two. I got out the other side and I realised that I was never going to make Bellingham if I didn't have some sleep, because I was going so slowly. 1 mile an hour sounds ridiculous, but we're in day 4 by now, and I think I'd had something like 7 hours sleep. So literally 30 minutes sleep, and then I was off. So yeah, I had it in the back of my mind that I was going to do more of these ninja bivvies, but it took a while for me to sort of rationally sink, the thought process to sink into my mind, thinking I actually need some sleep now, because otherwise this is just, my time is eating away. So yeah, the short story is my sleep strategy was at all of the checkpoints, and that includes the first one, which is a bit of a controversial point because it can be quite busy. And then as and when have these little 30-minute power naps. Yeah, it worked for me.
Yeah, that's interesting, Mike, because I've been doing this series of Countdown to the Spine with Stephen Brown, and we did one about Stephen's sleep strategy, and it quite surprised me because I just assumed that if you've only got 8 or 9 hours of light and daylight, and the rest of it's in the dark, then I thought you wouldn't want to waste the daylight. So if you got to a checkpoint and it was daylight and you had to sleep, then it was a waste. But he was saying, and you've said there, that wasn't the factor. It was more important to get a decent sleep in a checkpoint.
Yeah. I mean, there was one other guy that, we were the tortoise and the hare, and he had taken a couple of attempts to finish the spine, and he said he suffers really badly with sleep deprivation, and he can't sleep during the daytime at all. So that's in my blog. So he was literally making sure that if it was daylight, he'd just go through a checkpoint and keep going and find somewhere to bivvy. But I suppose he had the advantage of having done the course already. He knew where these spots were that were good points to bivvy. So he would bank all his sleep in darkness and keep going during the day. But the funny thing is that it was like that hare and tortoise. I'd catch him up and he'd be like getting out of it. I nicknamed him Fluffy because of the dog out of Harry Potter. But he would be getting up out of his sleeping bag feeling all nice and cold, like he'd had a really good, decent sleep after about 4 hours, and he'd be off. So that just goes to show that two different strategies end the race in, I think it was only like 4 or 5 hours difference. But he was moving quicker, but sleeping for longer. I was moving overall slower, but sleeping less. So, but then that's, his strategy wouldn't necessarily work with mine, and I'm not sure that mine would work with his, because I know my limitations on when it comes to speed. So I'm looking to take advantage of knowing myself, knowing what I can and can't do. I think ages ago I said to Mark Laithwaite from Lakeland about being coached, and he said, Mike, let's be honest, you are what you are. You do what you do. Why change it? Why try and be top 25 or top 50 and putting yourself through all of the training and potentially being injured? Don't change. If it ain't break, don't try and fix it. So he was quite right, actually. I had to take a little bit of a pill there by accepting that I was never going to be any better than I was. But he was quite right. So you've got to accept who you are. There's no point in looking at someone else's strategy and try and mold it into that if you know that your own personal experiences and your capabilities aren't actually going to match that. So I work off my strengths. Some of that is non-physical training. Some of it is psychological, mental resilience. You just have to work to what you've got in your toolbox.
Yeah. No, that's a really helpful answer. Thank you. I think another area that people are always fascinated by is feet. And Alex wants to know, feet take a real pounding in long distance races. What has Mike learned, do's and don'ts, and what advice can he give regarding foot care to other runners thinking of starting out? So what's your foot strategy?
I think that's Alex Pickerel. She's probably asked that question because she doesn't like the idea of spending the whole of her week looking after my feet again. Yeah, she was great. The medics are fantastic. The spine, I thought about doing a 5th blog about things I know now that I wish I'd known then.
I would.
But to be honest, the race went, without being modest, went really well. I know the blog sounds like a lot of it was quite in the doldrums and what have you, but there's not a lot I would change. But the one thing I would change is footwear. And I didn't focus a lot. And I think I got to checkpoint 1. I changed out of my Sportiva Mutants, and they were so caked in mud. I was influenced by what they looked like rather than the fit of the feet. So had I got my Marigolds out and put those back on, I don't think I would have suffered with some of the issues I was suffering from. There's a picture on my blog, and it's just these shoes are, you don't recognise them. They're so covered in bog. And there's a little label with a number on it. It looks like the sort of labels you put on the feet of somebody in the morgue. These belong to Mike Churchyard. And I think I just looked up and thought, you know what, I can't put those on. And unfortunately, I then went for my Hoka Tours, which are a Gore-Tex boot, but they're incredibly narrow. And what I could have done with looking back, was swapping over. I should have worn those from the start, because even after like 46 miles, my feet were starting to feel a bit numb from the amount of water that we'd traipsed through, with all the flagstones being under 6 inches of freezing water. So although they were dry, they were feeling quite numb, so they were sensitive. So I think for me, it was paying attention to the footwear that was appropriate to the terrain. And that was a failing on my part, really, of not actually recognising or not giving the respect of the bog and what was going to be after checkpoint 1, because I think had I stayed in my La Sportiva Mutants that had a slightly wider toe box, I wouldn't have had that rubbing on my 2 little toes. And then by the time I got, because the second section is 61 miles, so you don't get a chance to change these. So once you've made a bad decision and you're on the trail, you've got a 61-mile race in itself. And you're then getting to Hawes, and my feet were already done by then, and it was, my toes became infected. I was playing catch up from that point. And then I had another schoolboy error, is that I realised that when I got my sock and my shoe choice was so late and last minute, that I realised that by the time I had a liner sock plus the waterproof sock, that I needed another boot to be bigger for as I progressed through the race. So I bought these boots, lastminute.com, didn't get a chance to try them on. They weren't as good as I was hoping, so I just had to run with it. So, yeah, I think it's about knowing your feet, knowing your footwear. I made a massive error, really, when it came to footwear. Not to start with, but to be able to cope with what was under my feet going further into the race. That the one thing that people say, don't change anything just before the race, and that was the most important thing probably of that race, is looking after your feet. I mean, that sounds quite common sense, but 268 miles, it is a hell of a long way.
Yeah,
you can't deny that. And your feet have got to cope with that for 5, 6, 7 days.
Yeah, and I think it's not just the distance; it's the fact that it's in that boggy ground. You know, if you were doing that same distance on firm ground, then it wouldn't be the same issues. It's the fact that your feet are getting so wet, aren't they?
Yeah, I think I did say I wasn't going to do it again, but I do fancy doing it again. I think I'd go with a Gore-Tex boot right from the start with gaiters, to be honest, knowing that you've got to realise that I'm not looking at top 25, so I am where I am. And I did walk probably 220 odd miles of the whole route. So actually, a lightweight Gore-Tex walking boot that suits your feet, I think, is what I'd go with.
Right. Great. Okay, I've just got one more question that came before the interview, and then we've got quite a few that are on the live chat. So the final one... No, it's great. The final one that we had that was given was from Abby Dennis, and she said, interesting. The good question is, so how did this event help you in life situations that you have otherwise found difficult or not even succeeded in? So quite interested to know your thoughts of having finished the Spine. How has it affected the rest of your life?
I think you actually put on there, John, when I finished it, saying, lap it up. This is, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was something along the lines of, life's not going to be the same again, or life changing, or something like that. And it's a bit of a cliche, but it does actually feel, I can't stop talking about the Spine race, and I still can't to this day. And in fact, I think longer as time goes on, I can't. I look back and, was it a dream? Did I do it? The hardships that you go through, 10 hours, 15 minutes sleep in the course of 7 days, 268 miles, bog, rain, snow. And I think when we've got COVID that came along shortly after the race. So I was really incredibly fortunate to have actually finished a race before it started, but great resilience. Whenever I've had negative days, I think pretty much every time I've looked around and thought, do you know what, you finished the Spine, you can do that. Then this, I'm not saying it's a doddle, but the challenges that have faced me since retiring from the police, with starting my own business, with COVID and stuff like that, every time I just sort of think, well, I think I look at the picture thing, that the frame and the medal behind me, and I think that's a great reminder to actually, one of my quotes that I'm always giving to other people is the T.S. Eliot one about, only those that push themselves too far will ever know how far they can go. And I think this Spine has taken that to a different level to me. I don't think I'm going to top that. I might do the Spine again, I might finish it again, but that week was such an incredible week, from the people around me, the connection with the trail, the comments, the inspiration to others, the inspiration that was given to me from others. It was the whole package when it came to mental resilience, I think, going forwards. It's not to say that haven't had days where, I found them tough since, but I think it's short-lived. What can I say? It's been an incredible, life-changing is a little bit extreme, I think. Kids are life-changing.
Yeah.
But something like the Spine, life-enhancing, and makes you realise how grateful you are for some of the things that you have got in your life and what's around you and your friends. Amazing.
Yeah. I must say, I've only met you a couple of times, and we've sort of been in touch on social media, but I would say that from my perspective, it looks as though finishing the Spine was a massive achievement. And I think it has made a big difference, just the way you've dealt with things and are dealing with things. And I think once you've got that in your locker, having finished a race like that, when you're in the future in other races, you can draw on that experience, can't you, of knowing that you were able to tough it out and to finish it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we've got some questions here on the live chat. So first one is from Mick Brown, and he wants to say an ultra normally has checkpoints every 7 to 12 miles. So it's not, a couple of hours, 3 hours at the most, and you've got another checkpoint. With the spine, the checkpoints can be every 50 miles, almost the length of an ultra in itself. So we wanted to know, sort of how do you cope mentally with that? The thought of knowing that the next checkpoint is another, well, you were saying there, 60 odd miles to the next checkpoint. Because often you focus on getting to the next one, but if the next one's 50 miles away, that can be a long time, can't it?
You're frozen there, John. Are you?
Yeah, you're back now. There you go.
Still there?
Yeah. Did you get the question?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. Yeah. Basically, that was almost like pressing the reset button as you came out of a checkpoint, because of my my checkpoint strategy was, and this was something I learned, that your race doesn't finish as you get into a checkpoint. Your race finishes at the point where you've showered and you go to bed. So you've got all your processes, and that was one of the things that I was incredibly efficient at. I drew that from Stephen Brown about making sure everything's done before getting your food and then having some kip. But I think I tended to, as I came out of a checkpoint, I put some music on or something, and I sort of got into that zone of knowing that I've got 40 miles, 50 miles, 60 miles in front of me. And yeah, that was massive, because even Lakeland 100, the longest one's sort of 11 miles apart. And it's just a completely different mindset. You've got to just bank that. You've got to forget that. You've got to come up with something that the loneliness didn't bother me. On the official Spine film, there's a guy, I can't think of, Javid, I think his name is. He talks about the connection with the trail. And I think if you buddy up with someone, some people love the idea of going as a group or a couple of you if you're similar race strategies. But I think what he said on that film completely resonates with me, is that if you're with somebody else, some of that connection gets lost because you're either talking or you're worrying about them. Everyone goes through different phases in a race where they've got highs and lows, and you're managing that between a group of you if you're together. Whereas for me, I just loved the connection with I did actually really enjoy the night times, possibly even more than the days, because it's just you, the trail, it's your mind, it's your friends on social media, it's the smells, the sights, whatever, or the weather. So for me, it was just getting in that zone, leaving a checkpoint, getting all your stuff sorted, putting some music in, and just sort of relaxing into it. I think one of the key things for me was, I mentioned it right at the start, I just didn't panic. You just know that you're set in for that period of time. And I think the other thing I can relate to it is that when we've all done, like in our early running careers, we've done a 10K or we've done a half marathon, you think when you get to the end of that half marathon, how do people do marathons? Because I'm wasted. Or you get to the end of a marathon, you think, how do people do ultras? But I think the brain and the mindset is such an amazing thing that if you're tuning your mind in at the start of a race to a half marathon or a marathon or an ultra, it's got a great way of actually achieving that distance. Whereas if you said to yourself, well, I'm only doing a half marathon, and the checkpoint wasn't there, I can see that the mindset negativity sets in, because it's like, well, I've got that plan, and all of a sudden that plan is not going to plan. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think we've just got a wonderful way of tuning in. When I left, I think I remember leaving Middleton, I suddenly realised I hadn't spoken to the kids for 2 days. So I just phoned the kids. I said goodnight to them, and I put some music in, and I was off on my way to that horrendous cauldron snout. Just relaxing into it, not panicking, and just knowing that you're out there for that period of time. Yeah,
no, I think you're right. I think the whole thing about your mind, if you're doing a half marathon, then your mind knows you're going to stop after 13.1 miles. If you're doing a spine race, you've got a completely different mindset, haven't you? And it's amazing how the mind adjusts to that. Okay, the next question we've got is a very serious one. This is from Nige Burke, and he wants to know, what is your favourite colour of marigold gloves? You mentioned marigold gloves. What's this all about?
I couldn't believe how few people had marigold gloves, because I was given that little tip. Is that when you're totally caked in bog and mud and stuff, and I went for the bomb-proof sort of setup, so I had shoes, gaiters, and I had waterproof trousers over the top. So if you can imagine taking that lot off when you get to a checkpoint, put on a pair of marigolds, take it all off, give it to the checkpoint staff who label it and put it wherever, take your marigolds off and you're good to go, whereas, the people that hadn't got those, they're suddenly faced with these horrendously horrible, gritty, boggy, mucky hands. And then you've got to be looking at, I mean, I still wash my hands even though I had the marigolds, but it just gave you that transition period into a checkpoint where you're not sort of out thinking, right, I can't touch anything because you've got caked in mud.
Yeah, great. So what's your favourite colour then?
Oh, sorry, yes. Well, yellow, of course. Standard marigold. I did actually use them out on the trail. There was one night where I kept on falling over and, I needed to reset and change my gloves. So I did actually use marigolds to actually do that process because you get obsessed with having clean hands, and I was in the middle of nowhere. There was nowhere to wash my hands, so they came in handy for that time.
Yeah. Well,
sort my kit out, get myself.
I'm sure there'll be people that will be adding marigold gloves onto their kit list right now. So but you're right. It's a great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, marigold gloves and a black bin liner for if you want to do a quick bivvy. You just rather than taking all your kit off, you just put your feet inside the black bin liner, inside your bivvy bag or sleeping bag.
Okay. The next question we've got is from Stephen Blythe, and he wants to know, is there anything you wished you'd had in your drop bag that you didn't pack?
Well, Stephen, thank you very much for that question. He was the one that said, why are you taking spare poles? They're dead weight. And of course, I had the famous incident where I snapped a pole less than 100 miles in on my way to Keld from Thwaite. So, there's a picture of me, or there's a picture of my poles where I've got 3 poles, 2 that are fit for hobbits and 1 that was fit for me. I was cursing. That was one of those moments where I probably reached out to social media and said I need a new pole, and 2 people started telling me about the rules and the fact that if we gave you a pole, then we'd be breaking the rules and regs. So, yes, thanks for that, Steve. But next time I do it, I will definitely have a spare set because they've been valuable,
Right, great. Just get the next question here. Andrew Timon wants to know what was your lowest point and your highlight. Have you got a low point and a high point?
Oh, I think my low point was just coming. Andy was at Bellingham, and I was a bit of a mess there. I've said that at no point did I ever think I'm going to finish. Give up. But I think that was one of those points where I walked in and I didn't know how I was going to carry on. So that, in my mind, that's just slightly different to thinking that I'm going to give up. It was a case of I don't know how I can keep going. I wanted to keep going, but I was, that was a bit of a trudge. And that was, that's Greenhead, Hadrian's Wall, through the forest to Bellingham. And it just went on for ages. I was hoping to get there a lot earlier, and I was worried that I was starting to get close to the cut-offs at that point. So I think that was probably my lowest point. I don't know if you know her, the running granny, Angela White. She was literally just inside the door, and I think I said in my blog, it was. I hope she didn't take offence at the comment, but it was like having my mum there, and she sort of put her arm around me and just gave me a little couple of pointers. The only thing she didn't say was, "Mike, you're never going to do this again, are you?" But she just spoke some straightforward stuff about sort of getting yourself sorted. You've got 4 hours to get yourself turning around, so don't give up. So I think I was in tears at that point. Yeah. High point. I had an amazing week. My blog is quite detailed, but I think the high point's got to be coming down. The other low point was dealing with Richard on the Cheviots, but I think the high point, when you see that signpost that says Kurt Yetholm 2 miles, I was just absolutely. It was the first time that I ever actually thought about the finish and that I could allow myself to think that I was going to finish. I'm not making this up. On my blog, I mentioned it. And I think on the start line, I thought about, oh my God, what are we going to do? This is 268 miles. This is just insane. I couldn't even actually, it was almost like a surreal moment. Am I really here? I got to pinch myself. I'm on the start line of the spine race. And for that moment onwards, I never ever thought about the finish. I thought about checkpoints and thought about anything else. And I think that the sign that said 38 AM 2 miles was just an absolute sheer elation. All the emotion came out. But yeah, that was when I suddenly thought, do you know what, I've done it.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing sort of mile and a half before I got to the finish.
Yeah, amazing. And the emotion of finishing a race like that must be incredible. So yeah, well done.
Yeah.
You did mention there about you helped someone, didn't you, in that last section? Do you want to just tell us just briefly what happened there?
I left Hut 1 on the Cheviots, and it was just like incredibly exposed up there. I'd never been up there, but there's just nothing around you. And then it was getting dark. I was getting cold myself. I was thinking that the terrain was a lot slower. My fatigue, I was going a lot slower than I'd hoped. I think I mentioned that I wanted to get back to the pub in time for last orders or earlier. And I had a bit of a reset because I realised how slow I was going. And then I think I put something on Facebook saying, guys, I'm ever so sorry, but I think there's going to be delay in the finish. Be patient with me. And everyone was like chucking in comments like, oh, crikey, that's past my bedtime, or oh, do you not think you've done enough dot watching, or something like that. And then it wasn't much after that I got a phone call from the race HQ, and I saw the number come up. And without going through the whole story, I'd made a couple of errors earlier in the race. I'd missed a diversion. I'm thinking I'm in trouble or something. So I said, what have I done wrong now? And they laughed and said, no, there's nothing you've done wrong. And it all got a little bit serious at that point because they said there's a runner a couple of kilometres up the trail that we can't get hold of. Can you sort of make best speed to try and get and see what's going on? And I was doing quite well anyway, but all of a sudden I was in a different gear and I sort of switched off from the race. It was a bit of adrenaline kicked in, fight or flight. A police head was coming on, thinking, this is so exposed up here. You don't stop. You might have stopped for a pee if you're really desperate, but you wouldn't stop for try and bivvy. It was icy underground now. The breeze was there, the wind chill. So 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, I suddenly come across Richard, and he's like semi-unconscious, just lying in that sort of fetal position in a ditch. And bless him, he wasn't with it. He started talking about elephants. It was their fault. They got in the way. And the only conversations I had from him were, it wasn't my fault. Cows, elephants, I'm not cold. It wasn't a coherent conversation. So literally, I said in my blog, the SAS, everyone goes on about the trackers that you have to wear on your rucksack and how big. I mean, I looked at the Spine race and it was like a lunchbox, the actual film. But these are, from open tracking, they're like matchboxes now. And I was sort of thinking, what I need is one of those big buzzers, like on a game show or something, because I couldn't find the SOS buttons. My hands were freezing. Anyway, I was there 40 minutes before the SST crew came. They came from Hut 2, so they were making from Hut 2 whilst I was making from where I was. Bless him. He didn't finish. So he's like 10 miles from the finish. He's done 259 miles. Ended up getting lifted off the mountain by MIT, but it's quite an emotional thing because you're at your lowest anyway. I mean, my blog is quite raw. It's my feelings. It's my race. It's my journey, and I make no apologies for that because I want to look back in years to come and read it and think that's how I was feeling, the smells, the sights, whatever. But you're day 6.5 into a 7-day, 268-mile race, and it was just so raw at the time. You're tired, you're cold. So it's incredibly emotional. And I suppose you get the feeling, again, it was like I'm still going and yet another person hasn't finished. I ended up having to carry on because I was just getting too cold myself. I'd got all my layers on. I mean, I could have got into my bivvy. I had my sleeping bag. So it's not like I was being foolish and I didn't have ways of looking after myself. But in a race mode, I was getting too cold to hang around. So I left those guys in the storm shelter that we'd all put up above him and let them wait for MRT to come and rescue him effectively. But I'm still in contact with him. It's great to have that connection. He's very grateful. I did what I thought was right at the time. I'm not sure I'd do anything different. But it's nice to have that connection with him, and I'm still in contact with him now.
Yeah. No, well done. And I think, again, it's one of the strengths of ultra running and Spine in particular, just that looking after each other, isn't it? Because it is such a long race and you're so far from checkpoints, that you are really dependent on each other, aren't you? And I'm sure if you were in that situation, then you'd expect someone to stop and help you, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think that's indicative of ultra running, and it probably is the same in running as a whole. But the one thing I love about ultra running is that whether you're the person at the back or you're the elite or checkpoint staff, you're all there trying to help everyone get to the finish. And it's not about time. It's not about where you come. Yeah, I mean the elite guys, they're on a different level. Yeah. Amazing to watch what they do. But
yeah, I've just put the photo on I've just put the photo on of you and Pav at the end, because I think that typifies that sort of that support, isn't it?
Well, that's at 1:30 in the morning at the finish, and he wasn't even racing, but he's won the race previously, and to get that acknowledgement, and I said to him, I said, "Oh, this is amazing, thanks ever so much," and he turned around to me and said, "No, this is about you." And that just goes to reinforce the ultra running community. And as I say, it might be the same in road running, marathons or whatever, but I definitely see it more in the ultra running, is that everyone is there trying to help everyone get to the finish. That people don't take any satisfaction by having a high DNF rate of a race. The races that are there because people want to push themselves to the limits and have that experience. If it was easy, then my mum would be doing them. So where's the challenge in that? Yeah. Bless her heart. But the DNFs come for a reason. Not all of them are because of injuries. Some of it's because people haven't got that same mental strategy, or they just haven't prepared, or they're not feeling the love for it on that day. But ultimately, everyone is just seeking that, helping everyone else to try and as many as possible to get to the finish line. And I think that's amazing. Yeah, and that's a very special photo, I've got to say.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for tonight. It's been really, really good. I think we've answered most of the questions, if I haven't quite got to yours. But there's one I want to finish on, and that is Billy Burns. He wants to know what's on the cards for this year. I assume he means next year now. Have you got any races planned for 2021? Hoping they go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, a lot of the races have been deferred from this year. So, and not all of the races are kept to their original dates. It's a matter of looking at what's in the pot and what I can realistically achieve. But I've got a really good year ahead of me. I've got the Ultra Tour de Snowdonia in June. I've got Lakeland 100 again, and then I've got a guaranteed spot in the CCC in Chamonix. So, wow. Unfortunately, the Fling very early on decided that they weren't going to run in 2021, so that one's off, but that would have been on my bucket list as well. So really good year coming up, and I think that I'm really hungry for it as well. I think having that break isn't necessarily a bad thing between, with COVID and everything being cancelled. So it just reinvents that hunger to actually get to these races and do well and finish and enjoy it.
Well, I'll be following your progress with interest.
Actually just meeting up with all the people that you miss, that one of the key things for me is actually the people that surround the races. So being able to get on the start line with fellow competitors and friends, can't beat it. Yeah.
And I've got a feeling I think when the races do start again and we start meeting up, and I've done one race this year that was the Hardmoors 55. That was a staggered start, and it was great, but it's not quite the same, is it? I think when we have the mass start and we can all start together, and you're meeting up with friends again. So, but we'll get there. We'll be back soon. So that will be good. But I want to thank you so much again, Mike, for joining us, and thank you everybody for watching. And if you're watching this live, then thank you for being here now. And if you're watching it later on, then that's great as well. And thank you so much for coming. If you are on and you haven't subscribed to our Run to the Hills YouTube channel, then please do that, so you'll get notification of whether other videos come on as well. But thanks so much, Mike. Have a great Christmas, and I look forward to catching up with you at a race next year.
Definitely. Thanks ever so much, John. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it, and hope it's been benefit to some people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
cheers.
definitely. Okay. So bye, everyone.